Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Maria Guadalupe Davidson, and on behalf of Dr. Greg Dunaway, Dean of the Eberly College of Arts and Sciences, I am pleased to welcome faculty, staff, students, and the entire Mountain Air community, both near and far, and our friends and supporters to the first ever Eberly Roundtable. This inaugural event, I feel like I'm supposed to clap. This inaugural event brings together academics and public scholars, artists, and intellectuals to engage on topics central to WVU's land grant mission and national identity. The inaugural theme of this year's Eberly Roundtable is a coming together. Our distinguished participants have been invited to discuss Blackness, Black identity, Black agency, and Black presence in Appalachia. I would like to thank the following sponsors for their generous support: the Office of the Provost, the Office of the Vice President for Research, the College of Creative Arts, the Center for Resilient Communities, and WVU Press. Today's event marks the official beginning of the roundtable. Our guest speaker will present for roughly 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A. For those joining us on Zoom, please remember to put your questions using the Q&A button on the Zoom screen. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. William H. Turner. Dr. Turner, I cannot tell you how pleased I am that the opening of this event, the opening event of this year's roundtable, is the official launch of your book, The Harlem Renaissance: Stories of Black Life in Appalachian Town. Dr. William Turner is the fifth of 10 children. He was born in 1946 in the co-town of Lynch, Kentucky, in Harlan County. His grandfather's father, 4 uncles, and older brother, they were all coal miners. Dr. Turner has spent his professional career studying and working on behalf of marginalized communities, helping them create opportunities in the larger world while not abandoning their important cultural ties. He is best known for his groundbreaking research on African American communities in Appalachia, but Dr. Turner's work is universal. As an academic and as a consultant, he has studied economic systems and social structures in the urban South and burgeoning Latino communities in the Southwest. What he strives for, and on behalf of his clients and their communities, is for what we all want, and that is prosperity, understanding, and respect. Dr. Turner, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
I'll stand to the side here. You'll notice my mask, that's my family. It's an opportunity to say something about the most generous introduction. A very prominent man in my hometown died, and the eulogist was saying all these wonderful things about that man, such as Dr. Lupe Davidson just said about me. And the widow of the deceased, after the eulogist had said something about him being kind to widows and a philanthropist, and he lusted after no woman but his wife, and you know those nice things he said. And he just went on and on in this introduction, almost like I thought you would. And the widow nudged her daughter and said, "Well, they make sure they shout daddy." Yes. So I'm very happy to be here. Well, I want to thank Greg Dunaway and Lupe Davidson and this fellow right over here. Put his name next to his picture next to the door because he's been so welcoming. Those of us who have been getting this email, thank you so much for that. Okay. I'm going to go through these very quickly. I think that's the second slide, I'm not sure. But I'm going to run through this real fast like Jesse Owens. We're going to talk about Blackness, Black identity, Black agency, and Black presence in Appalachia. And I read this beautiful quote today that said, God was seen walking through West Virginia. And the stranger said, God, why are you walking through West Virginia? And God said, I'm working at home too. My work is all about some social history. Who are the so-and-so people, where they come from, what did they do, what did they contribute, what happened to them. Everybody can do that. And history is so very important, and that's why they teach it from the primary schools to graduate schools, and even the most, even the best politicians use history to justify things. Very important. One of the greatest historians of all time, Prodigy Woodson, a West Virginian. The founder of Black History Month, was born and raised between Central Appalachia, between West Virginia and Virginia. He studied at Berea College in Kentucky. First article was written by Prodigy Woodson. It was called Freedom and Slavery in Appalachian America in 1916. So this first Black historian of note next to W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about Appalachia in 1916. And I love this statement by Muriel Rukeyser. That's the nature of my book. The universe is made up of stories and not of molecules. The most important thing that we have are our stories. And that's what I do in my book. This fellow right here, Edward Joseph Cabell, we used to call him Eddie Joe. He hated that. But Ed grew up in southern West Virginia. I met Ed in 1978, and Ed was doing things with the John Henry Festival in the 60s. Very, 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 very wonderful man. I passed that a couple years ago. We did a book published in 1985 called Blacks in Appalachia. And Ed Cabell dedicated his life to collecting, archiving, and sharing the stories of Black people in Appalachia. It was an inspiration for some of the things I tried to do. Okay, a few people I want to talk about, mention, who are doing some things. I think Nkishe will be here. She's not here already. Bill Ison. This is a wonderful new group doing some things that I think are very important. Stand up, Crystal Slater, right here. Crystal, my God, West Virginia. That's my God. She's doing some great things. One of your own, as they say. My main man. There's a new book out called Black Huntington, so don't let anybody tell you that people have been working and writing and studying and interpreting Black Appalachian life for many, many years. And this is a fantastic read from this historian. Let's get started. What do I know about what I'm going to talk about? This is my father. My father was born in 1917, and this was the first 5 of us. My oldest sister was 7.2 years older than me. We were step-children. This was me 17 years ago. I didn't have on a nice bow tie or a suit, but I haven't changed very much. Where is Appalachia? Very quick run. I think a lot of people are confused by that. By the way, this iconic little picture here for me is the Appalachian African American Cultural Center in Pennington Gap, far southwest Virginia, run by Ron and Jill Carson. And this was the one-room school that his grandmother founded for the colored students of Southwest Virginia in the 1920s. That's Appalachia. Everybody knows blackness, Black identity. That's it up to there in that space. We are somewhere right here. I think I have that right. I grew up right there in Harlem, Kentucky. Some of you grew up in the Alleghenies, Pennsylvania. And as you know, the biggest cities in the federal designated Appalachian region are between Pittsburgh in the north and Birmingham in the south. Both.
He's going to run the PowerPoint for you.
Would you like me to? Oh, please. Thank you. I'll be like this. Thank you so much. Okay. Birmingham, Tupelo, Ellis Presley grew up in the Appalachia. Greenville, Tri-Cities, Asheville, Border Flat grew up in Appalachia. Nina Simone, Mississippi, I ain't gonna say the rest, grew up in near Asheville. My father grew up in this little town near Appalachia, Virginia, the only town in the whole region, Appalachia, Harlan County, Charleston, Ireland, Pittsburgh, you see it. No, Morgantown in the red, of course, next one. Who is this?
Yeah, man.
Yale Mansion, I think, unless I put the wrong picture down. Let's make sure, when you talk about the Appalachian region, a West Virginian runs that now, and she graduated, I understand, from West Virginia University. I just sent her a copy of my book, so that, well, we do things like that. So, next one, please. These are Virginia's Appalachian counties that you see out in the west. There's an Appalachia again. Every county in 55 counties, somebody told me, are in this Appalachia. Not too long ago, not many people were going to be caught dead in Appalachia, let alone be or identify as an Appalachian. Now there's a whole new crop of people who call themselves Appalachians all of a sudden. For example, there's a group called the Expat Collections. These are a bunch of Appalachians who are now journalists who live everywhere from Barcelona to Norway to Benham to Bluefield, and they focus on Appalachia, and many of them left and returned home, and the writing covers this. Believe it or not, Youngstown, Ohio is now in the Appalachian region. When you think of Lake Erie? Yeah, near Cleveland. Counties as far north as that are considered Appalachia. So Appalachia is a really geopolitical construct, and a lot of different cultures in and out of that. So there's between cornbread and tortillas. Appalachia has become a booming Hispanic population, and it's growing food scene. And as a person I deeply respect, Ken Otterberg, said to me yesterday, if you want the best measure of the population dynamics and the growth of any city in America, if it doesn't have an influx of Mexicans, it isn't growing. Think about that, let that sink in. And then he went on to add, oh, and by the way, and Indians who are from India, Asian American populations growing, that lets you know what place to go. So if your town isn't getting a lot of people named Jose and Lupita, your town isn't growing. Okay, next one. Very quickly, I want to go through two of Kentucky's best known Black writers and poets, and a word, Frank Walker. In 1991 came forward that he had taken sole responsibility to fill this void and bring to existence the culture of Black people in the Appalachian region. And you know, some of us are working on Blacks in Appalachia a little bit earlier than that. So Mr. Walker's word came to imply that anything that had happened before then was unremarkable, pedestrian, or it didn't exist, and people thought of that term Appalachia. And quite frankly, I vehemently had a problem with that. Even to the point of saying, most Appalachians I know don't like anybody coming in and defining who they are. We'll do it ourselves. So I won't go on to that much, but that's the Appalachian poets. There's an action. Bell Hooks recently began to do some things where she said that she would only know these hills as Appalachia. Alison Bell Thursday, I think, I'm going down to the college next week. Same thing as we mentioned before. Some people begin to kind of brand Appalachia in a way that's like selling a piece of soap. Next one. Oh, me and my mom. My mom and I were on the way to my father's funeral that day, 1987 or so. Mama was once asked, I asked Mama, I said, Mama, do you identify as an Appalachian? And she said, no, Billy, you know damn well I'm a Baptist. Most people in Appalachia don't call themselves Appalachian, they don't use that word. Sociologists and somebody else like that. Oh, so did J.D. Vance. Ron Howard, Andy Griffith show. Remember, we got paid $50 million to do a film a couple of years ago, I think it was. So that Apple exploitation, people have always kind of exploited this for its mineral resources, as well as the way you can sell its people's problems. I grew up in that neighborhood right there. Now, the reason I chose that picture is that not all Appalachian looks like a car is in the yard and a pig and a dog is on the porch and that stereotype. That's my grandmama's house right there in Lynch, Kentucky. I just thought it was a cool thing. I got taught by some pretty good people. John O. Franklin was a person I spent some time with. I used to hang out with Mr. Haley for 10 or 12 years. I think that picture was taken in 1990, 30 years ago, I guess. So I was doing some research for Mr. Haley when I kept saying, I gotta write me a book like that. This is what I tried to do. My 4 grandchildren, Hodari Jr., William Lucian, Africa, and Amani. There's a section in my book on how my mama had a hissy fit because we named our children Swahili names. Africa is her granddaughter. And when Africa was born and my son took her home with his wife and the rest of them, and he laid this baby on my dying mother's chest, and we had named our oldest daughter Keisha Chawala. We had named our oldest son Jomo Kenyatta. And we had named our youngest son Hodari, which meant man-child. And so man-child takes his daughter home, puts it on mama's, and mama said, what kind of crazy African name y'all give this? And my son said, it's not an African name, mama. Her name is African. Now, one of his cousins, my brother's son, he and his wife named their daughters from A to Z, Amara and Zuri. Mama would turn over in her grave because that was an interesting conversation in our home. What's wrong with y'all? It was the 1960s. It was 1968 when I got married. And so Mama had a problem because my wife at that time had long, pretty hair and she cut it off. And Mama was, Lord have mercy, girl, every colored woman in Harlem County want to have hair pretty as yours. And you don't let them talk you into that apple. I'm showing my age, I suppose, but you have to know, somebody got a mama like that in here, I'm sure, who thought you had lost your mind when you stopped. Okay, here we go. My sister right there in 1958, when they had the Lynch Colored School Band. I mean, you think Florida A&M had a band, these kind of band things. We were doing that in colored schools in the mountains of the South, in Gary, West Virginia, in Beckley, West Virginia, in Bluefield, in Princeton, and all through all these mountain towns, you found these vital Black communities. This man here, John B. Stevenson, was my mentor. I met John in 1966. Appalachia needs more teachers like John because John grabbed a little colored boy and picked him up, put him on the fence. And I don't think how many teachers like that. People who, I remember the first thing John did for me, I wrote a paper comparing Martin Luther King and Malcolm X in 1966. And John graded my paper, and on the bottom of his paper, he wrote, Dear Bill, I'm so happy that we have a bird's cage at home. I have something to put on the bottom of the cage. That's what he wrote on my paper. I said, Lord, have mercy, Jesus. His idea was, I'm not going to patronize you as a poor little colored boy and let you get away with this. This doesn't work for me. You go redo it. A lot of white teachers are afraid to do that with Black students because they don't want to hurt their feelings. That's the worst thing you do to them. And this man right here is the one who said to me, I think you should dedicate your whole life to studying Blacks in Appalachia. And I said, oh, no, not me, man. It's 1966. I want to go to Philadelphia, Mississippi. I want to go to Memphis. I want to go to those places in the deep Black South and do this and that. Because all I know about white folks in the mountains is that they're dysfunctional. They play banjos and they coal mining, family feud, Scotch Irish, gun toting ancestors, moonshine miners, and tools people. Our mainstream snake handling Christian fun. They said the worst thing about poor white people in the mountains of the South than they said about Black people. Somewhere between Jethro and Sambo. And Willie Mae and Daisy Mae. And neither one of those made very much sense to me, but they were the stereotypes. That's what my book was kind of trying to figure out. Heck, I saw more rebel flags on part of Texas last week than I used to see. And I saw a few last week. I was down in Philippines, somewhere West Virginia, and I thought it was 1965 again. There you go. You might remember they used to make jokes like it might be a redneck named Jeff Foxworthy with his name. Maybe the only people that can still be made fun of and not being accused of using racist slurs and being prejudiced is mountain white people. You still joke about it. Let's get to it. Little school near where my mother went. This is right up the street from us. This is in Harlan County, a place called Black Mountain Public School. In 1927, my mother was only 3. Okay, next one. That's the Appalachian we're talking about. That's the region where we are. I'm not dealing too much with Pennsylvania. My sister-in-law went to Vassar. Did you know Vassar College is in an Appalachian county in southern New York? Cornell University is in an Appalachian county in New York. So you got to be sure what you're talking about. All these people went right up to there. Half these people in southern West Virginia, as Cicero tells us, they had come out of the uplands of South Carolina and North Carolina and Alabama into working at the coal mines in southern West Virginia. Read this book here, it's called African American Miners and Migrants. Fantastic story. That's the Appalachia I'm talking about. Southern West Virginia, Kimball, Keystone, Welch, Dairy, Pipestone State Park is my favorite place in the world. Bentley, Bluefield, Princeton. These are the towns in Southwest Virginia. My father being born in this one called Coburn, and these are the towns in Eastern Kentucky, about which my book says Black Harlem, but that's what I would call Black Harlem. It's a composite of places. That's a beautiful scene in my hometown about 10 years ago when it was October. You know, the trees don't turn gold anymore until a little bit in November. Well, this was looking in October 2014. And it was set in my hometown. I used to walk by there every day. My father worked in this mine right through here. Lynch couldn't lay claim to being an ideal community, but it was the largest coal temple in the world. It was the greatest coal camp in the world. That's where I grew up. So when I say the Harlem Renaissance, I'm comparing it to the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, when all those African American people come out of Tupelo, they came out of Jackson, they came out of Birmingham, they came out of Georgia and Florida, and they went up on State 95 into Harlem, 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. And we had our own Schomburg collection in my little Harlem, and we had our own Apollo Theater, and we used to get down and brown, and we was the blackest town for thousands of miles around. And that's what we thought we were. We didn't go anywhere else, and we didn't know anything else. Three black men clean as the Board of Health in 1941. These were typical coal miners. Down the street from my own house, a black man. Yes, sir, next one. And these people, this applies to West Virginia also. Most came seeking labor in the 1880s. They had come from the South. Their numbers grew precipitously in the first 35 years. All these black coal miners, and then it began to just dry up. Presently, there are less than 30,000 black people in all of southern West Virginia. Outside my high school, my cousin's school I went to, the Lynch Colored School, you might see it right at the top of the building. I went to that school for 11 years. We have the best teachers in the world. Best teachers in the world. Now, I have a chapter in my book that says integration was worse than a kick in the head by an Alabama mule. I know some people don't like to hear that. But the college going rate of black people from our little part of the world went down precipitously right up to the end. For the main reason, they got rid of all the black teachers. They just got rid of it. So one day, no more black teachers. And now they're all saying, you know, students do better when they have somebody they can, well, we could talk that 55 years ago. Three preachers in Hazard, some black men called dandy dancers, working on the railroad. I think that applies to the people of Southern West Virginia, black or white. Hardworking, family first, religious, school meant a lot to them. Their neighborliness and the community spirit, active civic organizations, black by God, West Virginia. That's all that is. Sense of humility. If you don't have a sense of humor, you better get out of town. Don't take yourself too seriously, girl. Who do you think you are anyway? Next one, please. Right up the street from where I grew up. See, pretty little town. We loved the mountains before it was politically correct to do so. My father been in that 40 years. These are 8 black men and 54 children feeding in 1955. I was 10. Knew every one of them. Last 4 black miners in Harlan County, Kentucky. I took that picture myself of Pastor Tinsley, Ricky Lowe, Ronnie Massey, and Drina Thomas. You met Drina a couple of years ago. And that's the school I went to, the Lynch Colored Public School. It was etched in the facade of the building when we built it in 1922. It's still there, you were in there last week. My mama played church. My mama played piano at this little church in Benham, Kentucky for 50 years. It was a Baptist church. every other Sunday, and the Methodist Church, other Sunday, Rising Star Baptist Church. And there are a lot of little coal camps where black people switched every week. Okay, I think about them. That's what ran all the black people out of the coal mines. This is called a continuous miner. My father ran one of those in his latter years. See how it made the black people get out of town? What town is this? I think it's down this county I grew up in. In 1940, around the time I was born, the population was up in the 72,000. And look at it now, population in Harlan County amongst it decreased down to by 2008. I'm sorry, I have another graphic. I should have had like 2050. But the decline of the black population, just like this, throughout Central Appalachia. That's my home. Yeah, that's the same thing. My father, he worked at the coal mine from 1938 to 1978. And this, as you know, is not mountaintop resilience, that's mountaintop removal. Because they can get the coal out so much quicker with this big drag line that does not require but 8 or 10 people. And it used to require 3,000. You get the same amount of coal in one day. You live in a company house, you go to a company school, you work for this company according to the company's rule. You drink company water, you see by company lights. The company has a preacher who teaches you what is right. I don't know, one person here grew up in a company town, anybody else grew up in a company town. Now they have company towns in Mountain View, California called Google Town. It's nothing but a camp. It's a self-contained community. My nephew worked for Facebook for a while, and you could work in that big complex out there in Mountain View, California, and it was just like Lynch, Kentucky. The company run it from bottom to top, and Mark Zuckerberg sits at the top of all. So that's the kind of town we have. What happens when they leave though? What happens when there's no work? What happens to the communities? Who cares about the people and their children? And no matter what they take from you, we were taught they can't take your pride on what's in your head. And that was so important coming through that little company town. And so where'd they go? They went to the Great Lakes states, they went to Atlanta, they went to Charlotte, they went to Chattanooga. And nowadays you'll find that all these cities that we left and went to, you can't go to Pittsburgh anymore unless you got a certain thing to take with you because there's no more of those kind of manufacturing jobs. And so you might go try to figure out how to stay in Bluefield. And that's where all the people were. There's a great book called African American Miners and Migrants. I would suggest you not because I did it afterward, but because these guys did a good job. And you can see how in Eastern Kentucky, where I grew up, how the population declined was. I grew up in this area, Eastern Kentucky, and this is the county I grew up in. The total population now is 26,000, down from 75,000 when I was born. And now the black population, there are more people in the student center right now than there are in my town. Okay. What's the nature of life of blacks in these coal camps? Great studies for some of you students to look into. Who are the role models for young black people? Who are the role models for you? What's the nature of race relations in these places nowadays? And what does the fact that 90% of the 2006 presidents vote in East Kentucky and Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia went to Donald Trump mean for black people? And I tell everybody, don't try to talk about Trump's Appalachia. That's such a joke. 49% of white women in California voted for Donald Trump. So don't give me a break. They didn't vote Donald Trump in from Princeton, West Virginia. Appalachia gets a bad rap on conservatism. This is throughout the United States. So 74 million people who still question the legitimacy of the last election, they are not all in Appalachia. But they're interesting. I think about that. Oh, this is a book we did in 1985, titled Black Appalachia, just a bit. That's when we just signed today. It came out today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Once again, that's the Appalachia we're talking about. The metaphor that I leave you with in terms of Appalachia and what it meant to my family and our people and what we try to do with our lives is that life is just full of mountains. And you have to go and find and climb. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presence. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Turner. I'd like to open it up for questions now. So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Turner? And if you can hear me, I think you should be able to hear me on the Zoom. Please put your questions using the Q&A function on the Zoom. So any questions in the room? Sorry, I was waiting.
How does the migration of white people out of Appalachia compare to the migration of Black people?
Generally speaking,
Yes.
you're saying,
So you have Black people and white people. A lot of Black people left. A lot of white people left as well.
like, I think I saw something from a comment that Crystal Good, who runs a news organization called Black by God, West Virginia. And it has been noted even by Joe Trotter, one of your own Carnegie Mellon. I think he has a new book coming out on Black labor in West Virginia, saying that had the general population of West Virginia migrated out of the Mountain State in the same proportion that Black people migrated out of the Mountain State over the last 50 years, there wouldn't be any people in West Virginia. I mean, Black people left West Virginia by the hundreds of thousands, between 1950 and 2000. And so that the population continues to decline. And I think I read somewhere in the last few months that Morgantown, West Virginia was paying people to move here or something like that. So there's something interesting going on here in terms of this migration. Because as I noted a minute ago, I think the footprint of Detroit, where a lot of West Virginians used to move to, just like they did out of Eastern Kentucky, they moved to work for General Motors. And then General Motors moved to the Pacific Rim. And all of a sudden you saw Detroit just constrict. Became a much smaller space. So that in a sense, there's no Detroit for anybody to go to anymore. And what are we left with in terms of Appalachia is the central question of our future, because we can see in Appalachia, there's a major issue with the way people are responding to their dispossession. That horrific Oxycontin and otherwise methamphetamine crisis and pandemic in southern West Virginia, East Kentucky, Southwest Virginia is quite related to people attempting to adapt to an untenable situation. And we have to do something about that more than what we've been doing. Southeastern Ohio along the river, same way. And I think one of the things that J.D. Vance just didn't put in plain English in his book is, quote, white people in America shouldn't live like this. That's essentially what he was saying. And not to ignore the fact that African Americans, Native Americans, have been, quote, living like this in America in one way or another for quite a long time. But that was a catch-all in hillbilly elegy, is that when that applies to whites in America. And I think we see that January 6th. We see people saying, somebody's taking our place. Our privileges are being narrowed. Will my grandchildren have the same privileges that I had? This being a 70-year-old, 75-year-old white male speaking. Because I'm looking at my grandchildren who are between 21 and 14. What's going to happen in 2035 when America is essentially a majority-minority population? You want to go see it, just go to Houston, right? Go to Los Angeles. There are a lot of majority-minority places as we speak. And I think it absolutely frightens me. It frightens me. Maybe because there's this thought that these minorities who become the majorities will try to have the same kind of political process that this majority got all these things. I don't think that we will, because we're dealing with two different kinds of orientations to life itself. By that I mean, an orientation to just a total profit motive, no matter what. But as opposed to a more humanitarian, we are all brothers and sisters, and that this universe we live on has some finite resources, and we have to figure out how to share them more equitably. And that there are certain unalienable rights that you talked about in this Constitution that is now in crisis. And people don't like to use the word constitutional crisis, but yes, I think people of color know what constitutional crisis means since 1776. A lot of times we didn't live by that Constitution, even though we hold these truths. And I'm preaching. So.
There are a couple questions.
Drifted off into that, but it doesn't make any less true.
So there are a couple questions that came in via the chat. So one, Dr. Frida Outlaw,
Yes.
just want to let you know she's in the house.
I know.
Right? she's
Nashville,
representing.
Tennessee.
Yeah, she's just representing. And so there's a question from a professor here at WVU. What is one of your favorite memories from your teachers at your high school?
Contextually, in our school, when you walked in that one door or its opposite in the school, you walk past photographs about this size on either side of the corridor. And there was Mary McLeod Bethune, there was Booker T. Washington, there was Marcus Garvey, there was Ralph Bunche, there was Marian Anderson, and there was Jackie Robinson, and there was, you name these iconic figures that we don't see in America until February. We saw them every day.
Mm.
On the other hand, not on the other hand, in addition to just being in a place that made you so comfortable, because you had these teachers, interestingly enough, I delivered papers, a morning paper, from 6:30 to 7:30, 8 o'clock every morning, and I delivered papers to 9 of my 11 teachers. I went by the house every morning. And then I saw them every Friday to get the 35 cents for the paper. And you would see them at church on Sunday. So and your mama playing the piano, so you couldn't get away with too much, but Miss Sweat would tell Miss Jones. And before you knew it, this whole village was raising you, and our teachers lived in the neighborhood. Their children, their husbands worked in the mines with our father. So it's almost like you were enveloped by the teachers the same way the mountain enveloped you around the town. Mm. And favorite memory, for most of us in my generation, they were the only Black professionals you knew, except Mr. Mitchell, who ran the funeral home. And then immigration ran him out of business too, because Daddy said, now these Negroes are dying for the white man to bury. That's just my father's opinion on them. They stopped taking their bodies to the Black man after they could say, I've been waiting for years to take, I waited to die, so I go to, I'm getting off the point. My point is, in terms of the teachers, we have something every Friday, at least twice a month on Fridays, Friday mornings, everybody would show up at the color school, almost in family groups, and we'd have something called an operetta, where we would have dramatic presentations of a raisin in the sun. And your teachers, they would decorate the whole school and the stage. It was like something off Broadway, right in the mountains, and they would make us recite, and God stepped out on space, and as far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 1,000 midnights down in a cypress swamp. These little teachers were teaching you James Weldon Johnson's creation when you were 7 years old. And don't even forget it when you're 77. You should have these marvelous teachers who went to Fisk, they went to Spelman, they went to Knoxville College, they went to West Virginia State and Bluefield State. And they came into all these coal towns and they planted little seeds. And you would be amazed at the intergenerational mobility of grandfathers who went to the 3rd grade, and they had doctors and lawyers and engineers and physicians and accountants and you name it in one generation. One generation. One generation. And it was primarily due to these teachers because they went through repetition and they really believed in just, they would say, now boy, you better act like you got some sense. And what does that mean? And I don't think teachers nowadays are allowed to say certain things to students that we were taking discipline, order, respect. I found myself almost being assaulted a few times teaching college in the last 10 years before I stopped, and would say, man, pull your pants up, boy. And I said, well, look, I catch myself because you said, pull your pants up, boy. And there were some young brothers nowadays that don't like to be told about their fashion, if you want to call it that, you know. And so to approach them with the pedagogical style that I got accustomed to my first 12 years with us, you know, the way our teachers dealt with us, I had to unlearn how to do that because things changed, the culture changed, the language changed. And so these teachers molded us in ways that I think are as extinct now as coal is under some mountains, because it all got mined out. And all those teachers are dead and gone. And as you do know, in a lot of the HBCUs in the Appalachian region, the vast majority of the teachers at the college level, at Bluefield State, at Bluefield College, at Kentucky State University. There's a whole population shift in who teaches, and the teacher can influence you in ways that only God can measure. I mean, they have this influence on you that you don't really understand, which is why I keep arguing when I get an opportunity to go out and talk to people like I am today and see people who are white, who teach Black children, Black adults in college, I say to them, please be like my friend John, who, when I was 20, he did not let me play on his liberalism. He held me to certain things that, Bill, this doesn't look too good. You got to be better than this. I had teachers like that in the old colored system, where now we're 3 generations removed from all Black schools intentionality. Although nowadays in some cities, you have schools that are just like the school I went to, where the vast majority, 90% of the students are Black and 75% of the teachers are white. And it's a problem we try to solve by every 6 months we have diversity training. That ain't gonna cut it. We need some training that goes a little bit further than those kind of formalities. So our teachers were excellent. Our teachers were just unbelievably dedicated. And you know, their whole thing is you might not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but you can have some common sense. And how do you impart common sense? You show it. You know, St. Francis of Assisi says, live by the gospel, but don't talk too much. Because a lot of people can talk the gospel, but you have to, there's a certain way you have to carry yourself as a teacher.
Are there any questions from the room? So trying to balance it. Any other questions from the room? No, you got something to say. Come on.
Well, I'll just say this. Ed Cabell was my first teacher in West Virginia. When I came here from Hampton University at Fairmont State, I enrolled and I took his Black History Month class. And then I took other advanced classes with Ed Cabell. And I wish they had treated him better, but he was an amazing professor. And
let me tell you why I don't think they treated him better as a veteran of that war. Ed did not go out of his way to make people comfortable.
at all.
You know the whole idea, anybody reading this book called White Fertility? That was called, no, be nice. If you want to make it and get tenure, don't make me uncomfortable. Don't say things that make me feel as though you're implying I have some issues. Ed would look anybody in the face. Ed, whoo! I mean, he would just look at everybody in the face and in the most country voice, tell people where to get on or off. And he was a soul that had a John Henry spirit, and he burst his heart,
Mm.
you know, on this Black Appalachian thing.
Mm.
Yeah, great man. I'm glad that you got to know him. Because he was at Concord College for a while, and somebody, I hope that the state of West Virginia would do more to honor Ed and realize what a giant he was for many years. I know.
So there's a question from Zoom, Jonathan Hall. I believe you know Jonathan Hall.
Jonathan.
Hall.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes, yes,
I promise.
geographer.
Yeah, right, yeah. He was here at West Virginia.
Yes, he sure was. His question is, what responsibilities do universities in the region have in educating their populations on Black Appalachia? And besides this week's roundtable, what are some other examples of universities who are doing this kind of work well?
I'm quite happy to report here in the twilight of my life that I have seen a critical mass of change in the colleges and universities in the mountains that are plugging into this new interest in Black populations. Just recently, I visited Western Carolina University in Colorado. They have a Department of Global Black Studies, and Appalachian Black issues is a critical part of that. Just a few weeks ago, I was at a very small college here, Alderson Broadus in Philippi, where 35% of their student body, which is less than 1,500, they are doing some interesting things. Berea College in Kentucky is the standard bearer, if you ask me. But at the level of Research One universities like West Virginia University, I was goose pimpled when you said this is our first roundtable, which means you're gonna have one next year. And so recently the Appalachian Studies Conference, which is a network, a collective of everybody interested in Appalachia, elected a fellow named Ricardo Nazario Calon as its president, Afro-Puerto Rican, heading up the Appalachian Studies Conference. Eastern Kentucky University. I was just in a conversation the other day where they're putting together out of Alabama A&M, I hope. The president there has shown interest, Dr. Wims, who's been the provost for a while, that you'd be surprised that there are 11 HBCUs in the Appalachian counties of Alabama alone. 11. And they're getting ready to come together and say, how can we begin to take a closer look at Black life in Appalachia? Alabama, in fact, the critical mass, if you add up all the Black people in Pittsburgh and Birmingham and set them to the side as big cities, the most population you will find of Blacks in the Appalachian region would be in what we call the southern part of Appalachia. Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi is in the Appalachian region. Tupelo, Mississippi is in the Appalachian region. Huntsville, Alabama is in the Appalachian region. Those cities in and around Birmingham, and they're young populations. So there's a lot to be said about what is going on in some of the colleges. Marshall University just brought their son home from wherever Cicero was. To the other side of the mountain, said, come home and help us with this. So Marshall is doing some things. The University of Kentucky. There's a consortium called the Appalachian Colleges Association. It's 36 colleges, and many of them are doing some good things in the communities throughout the mountains of the South. So I think there's a lot going on, but I would like to say that since every county in West Virginia is counted in Appalachia, it seems to me to be almost a no-brainer that the state of West Virginia should be ground zero for the study of Black people in Appalachia. I said it. I said it. I think that you have a marvelous opportunity to do that. And it becomes a matter of getting more courses. Your vice president for diversity has some things that are just wonderful going on that when we talk about the Mountain South. And so I salute you guys in West Virginia. I thank you for letting me come today and be a part of this inaugural roundtable. I hope I live, to be an older man to come back again.
Are there a question in the room? Okay, there's another question on the Zoom. Would you talk a bit about how you might compare your childhood experience with your father's in Lynch, Kentucky?
My childhood experience with my dad. I think it's pretty similar. He grew up in Coburn, Virginia, but the difference in the two was Coburn was a kind of rural place. As Ed Calvin used to always remind me in terms of our differences, Ed said, I didn't grow up in a coal camp. Because many coal camps are like industrial spaces where whistles blew, trains ran 24/7. There was this mishmash of people everywhere, as opposed to where Ed grew up in rural McDowell County. And so my father grew up in a rural part of Southwest Virginia, whereas over the mountain, 25 miles in Harlan County, where we grew up, it was a bustling town of 12,500 people when I was born in the mid-40s. When you can crowd 12,500 people in that little narrow valley, you'll be surprised what that population density does, particularly in terms of my father used to say, you know, we live so close together here that there are certain bodily functions you cannot take care of unless somebody hears it or smells it. That's what Dad say. But he ain't supposed to live as close to nobody else because he had grown up out in the country. By contrast, you know, we grew up in Lynch in a much more, it was almost urban compared to where Dad grew up. But as for a closeness to the land, in my book, I think I said, you know, the first environmentalist I ever met was my old man. He and his fishing buddies. And they could go fishing on a Friday night and stay on a creek bank or a river bank or a lake, you know, on the bank, and could go up the river at night without lights, just a flashlight. And they knew exactly where they were going in 80 feet of water at nighttime because they had gotten off from the coal mine at 8 o'clock at night, late in the evening, and we'd ride all night, get out there and go up. So these guys knew the mountains, they knew the seasons, they cooked, they did those things that are so much associated with being country in terms of raising hogs and other livestock and knowing how to skin a rabbit in one pool. And because I remember when I went off to college, speaking of how my life compared to my dad's, I called Dad and said, Dad, there's so many squirrels down here. Please bring my shotgun. I can't believe they just let squirrels run around everywhere. Because that was part of our life. I don't know if anybody in here has ever had, quote, wild game, as they call it at Whole Foods. That was the whole diet. They talk about free ranging cattle, man. The chickens were free range in my grandmama's backyard. She had about 40 of them. She called them by name until she would grab them and do them like that. Like, Grandma, you're just talking to the chicken yesterday. That's the kind of life that we lived. And it was. I know that it's a slice of America that is gone. That is gone. And that is why I appreciate so much people who live in cultures where things don't disappear so quickly. Everybody had to read Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And that is part of what happened in the mountains of the South, particularly in some of these communities that nourished us so wonderfully. Fell apart. It fell apart. Now, why? We called it progress. And as someone once says, change is not always progress. Things can change and you'll be back further than you were before you changed. And sometimes a new change, as they try to teach us, you should not only know why things happen, you should know, you should not only know what happened, you should know why it happened. And if you know why it happened, you'll be able to say, I see why it happened. I'll do this. We have so many people now who not only don't know what happened and why it happened, they don't care. They're apathetic. pathetic about their ignorance. Let that sink in. When somebody says, I don't know, and I don't care, but I don't know. That is when society has really evolved into a place that's any demagogue can come along and shift the whole culture, and people miss it because they did not see it happen. And even if they saw it, they get so far out over their skis that once they can see it, they're already way up in the air and don't want to go back. So they can go back and try that one more time. I think that's probably where we are right now. A lot of people are doing things they have no idea why they're doing. I know I have no idea why they're doing it. So why are they doing this? And there's a lot of otherwise intelligent people who are buying into some things that have happened in our culture in a very short period of time of the young people who don't look like you're 20. Don't want me.
We actually, so we want to do something special right now. So I'm gonna ask Crystal Good if she would step on up.
Well, Dr. Turner, Bill, you asked me if I could make you an honorary West Virginian. And
Tell the
so,
story to the folks.
yes, okay. You asked me, we were on the phone chat. You said, can I make you an honorary West Virginian? So with the power vested in me in this room, do you agree that Dr. Turner should be an honorary West Virginian?
Oh boy.
And this is
Bill Withers' home.
Bill Withers' hometown, and this is the Coalfield, the Negro Coalfield baseball team, the Slab Fork Aces, right?
Wow.
And so I didn't ask the question because I would hope that you would tell a little bit about the Negro Coalfield baseball teams from Lynch, Kentucky and folks. But so with the power vested in me, you are now an honorary West Virginian. Buy this t-shirt.
Can we get one more picture, please? Take your mask.
Oh,
I didn't recognize him.
oh, hold on one second. Hang on.
It's okay.
Okay, we're good.
Yay.
Thank you so much. About the baseball teams, that was another thing. We had semi-professional baseball teams and basketball teams. And in fact, my sister, Marie, who is 78, I was born on July 4th, 78 years ago, in Beckley, because my 9-month pregnant mama insisted on following the Lynch grade baseball team all the way to Beckley for the 4th of July, and that was a serious ball game on the 4th of July, only exceeded by the ball game that we play on what we call the 8th of August, when we celebrate colored folks' Independence Day, much as they do Juneteenth in Texas. So that throughout the coal camps, these rivalries between these baseball teams were extraordinary. The Birmingham Black Barons used to come to Lynch and play back when Willie Mays played with them. I don't know if any of y'all know Willie Mays, but that was the man. Hank Aaron played for the Indianapolis Clowns before he went to play for Milwaukee Braves. So it was these self-contained communities where there was no such thing that you hear so often nowadays when you go into communities. Hey man, what's happening? You most likely hear people say, ain't nothing happening. But there used to always be something happening because nature abhors a vacuum. And when you don't make things happen, funny things will happen. Negative things will happen. So we had proactive communities of men and women who had Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops, the so-called benevolent societies of the Eastern Star and Court of Calente, and the Masons and the Elks and the this and the that. And the community took care of its own. We didn't ask anybody for a thing because the community took care of its own. And somehow that went away with, more and more change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.